So you should see the notification live on YouTube, but it's still getting set up, and looks like we are now live on YouTube.
Someone needs to mute.
So, go.
One minute. I'm starting it now. Webinar starting now. Good evening and welcome to the South Fulton County Transit Initiative virtual public meeting. We appreciate you sharing a portion of your evening with us. And before we get started though, we'd like to take you through a few audience instructions. So your audio has been muted to reduce the background noise. And we really want your participation. This is an interactive meeting. So we would ask that you submit your questions in the Q&A box, any questions or comments that you have. And we will definitely try our best to answer as many questions as time permits. But if we don't get to your question due to time constraints, not to worry, because we will respond to you in writing. If after this meeting you have, you think of some different additional questions or comments that you have, on the screen you will see that you can email us at publichearinginfo@itsmarta.com. And if you have any general questions regarding MARTA service, that email address is custserve@itsmarta.com. We have a lot of great information to share with you this evening. Just want to take a few minutes to go through the agenda. I'm already doing our opening remarks, and in just a few moments, I'll introduce you to the team. We will then start and take you through the project focus, and then the process, schedule, and engagement strategy. Then we will take a look at the South Fulton Parkway key characteristics, and then the Roosevelt Highway key characteristics, and then we will save some time for Q&A. Next slide, please. So just to introduce you to our wonderful team, project team, we have Morgan Simmons, and she's with MARTA, and she is the project manager. We have Casey Mertz, and she is with WSP, Grady Smith with VHB, Michael Hightower with the collaborative firm, and myself, Kathy Warren, and I too am with the collaborative firm. So as I said earlier, this is an interactive meeting, and we are going to be launching a few poll questions because your input is invaluable. And so we're going to go ahead and start the meeting off with a poll question. Going to launch that right now. Okay. So the question is, why is this project important to you? And so we'd like you to select all of the options that apply. Number one, I'm a resident in the project area. Number two, I commute to the project area for work. Number three, I travel to the project area for shopping, recreation, etc. Number four, I travel through the project area with a destination that is, with a destination outside of the project area. And number five, I use transit on South Fulton Parkway. And number six, I use transit on Roosevelt Highway. Now again, please select all that apply to you. So we're going to give you a few minutes to make your choices, and then we will share the results. Okay, hopefully all of you have selected your options, and let's take a look at what we have. Jeez. Okay, so we'll have to come back to that because it looks like our results are not coming up just as right now. Let's see. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move forward, and then we'll come back to that.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Kathy. And whenever we're able to get that information, we can definitely plug in and let the audience know what the poll said. Good evening, everyone. My name is Morgan Simmons. I am the project manager with MARTA, and want to thank everyone for attending today and not finding it robbery of their time to be here. So today in this section, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the project focus and then take you through a few more sections. With the project focus, I'm looking at South Fulton Parkway and Roosevelt Highway US 29, which are two very important corridors, in the Southern Fulton County area. With South Fulton Parkway, we're going to be looking at bus rapid transit, BRT, feasibility. And as we're going through this presentation today, we're going to walk you through what does that mean and what are some of the things that we're assessing and looking into. With Roosevelt Highway, US 29, we're looking at transit enhancements for the existing service, which is MARTA Route 180. And so as we're going through the presentation today, we're going to talk to you a little bit about what does that mean? What does that entail in terms of transit enhancement opportunities? Next slide. So to talk to you a little bit about how did we get here, these two corridors have been discussion points for several years now. Prior to 2018, it was discussed in the Fulton County Comprehensive Plan. It was identified by GDOT with an access management study that they completed that looked into issues and concerns along that corridor, as well as, in a lot of local LCI and studies at the city level, where either one of the corridors are identified for transit opportunities and transit needs. wasn't until 2018 the Fulton County Transit Master Plan was adopted that identified Roosevelt Highway as well as South Fulton Parkway for high capacity transit needs. In 2020, the Southern Fulton Comprehensive Transportation Plan identified both of those corridors as smart, livable, economic corridors that are vital to the Southern Fulton County area. And last, but definitely not least, in 2020, the 15th Amendment was passed. And with the 15th Amendment, it directed MARTA to look at South Fulton Parkway for transit opportunities that could address needs. However, it was due to an excessive amount of feedback from our local government partners that allowed us to be able to add Roosevelt Highway to the project as well. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the process, the schedule, and our outreach efforts with this project. So as you see with the schedule, we have both of the quarters that are pretty much aligning and going in parallel with each other. With the assessment phase, we'll have that for both quarters, and that's the current phase that we're in now. It will end fiscal year 2023, which is June 30th, 2023. Then we'll move on into the concept and design phase. With South Fulton Parkway, we'll have a more refined understanding and design of what the BRT system could look like for the corridor. For Roosevelt Highway in the concept and design phase, we'll have those more refined designs of those identified stops based on the feedback received in the assessment phase. Last but not least, by 2025, for South Fulton Parkway, we will have our action plan, which will determine our next steps in actually putting a BRT system on the ground and on that corridor. But Roosevelt Highway, because it is definitely considered a more short-term opportunity to be able to place some improvements quickly, we hope to be able to begin construction of those identified stops and stations based on the feedback received in the previous phases. Next slide. So for the outreach and engagement that you'll see over the next few months, we'll have 3 engagement points that will allow for opportunity for our stakeholders, our local stakeholders, and the public to be able to weigh in on how we move forward in this project. With this current phase, we're looking at existing conditions. And so as you can see, we've been meeting with a lot of people, and we have our general public meeting today, meeting with even more. This will be the general cadence that we come to when we have our engagement points. That's meeting with our elected officials, meeting with stakeholder agencies that are interested, as well as coming to the public. In the next 2 phases, engagement points, we will bring to you all different elements as a part of this assessment phase. During the latter part of this year, we'll bring some initial transit concepts and scopes, which will be options. What are some things that we actually could bring to the corridor? And then we'll bring that to the public later on this year. And finally, in early 2023, we'll bring the final deliverables based on all the feedback that we've received in the first 2 phases, or engagement points, Next slide. So now I'm going to turn it over to Casey Mertz, my colleague with WSP, and she's going to walk us through the key characteristics of both the corridors. Casey?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Morgan. All right, so this next part of the discussion, we're going to start with South Fulton Parkway, and then we'll move into Roosevelt Highway. And after each section, we'll have a polling question to check in and get some feedback from you guys on each of those 2 corridors. So Morgan just gave us an overview of our whole project schedule or process. Gave us an overview of all of the phases and all of the work that's coming down the pike over the next year or so. And so what she indicated is that we are wrapping up our existing conditions phase, and our existing conditions phase is really a fact-finding mission. So we're going out and looking at things like land use, travel patterns, traffic, current infrastructure, and development and future development that we think is coming in the future. Compiling all of that into an existing conditions report, also talking to people like here tonight, talking with the public. We've spoken with a number of elected officials and jurisdictional representatives and other stakeholders to really understand what's going out on these two corridors today, what's coming down in the future, and what the needs are and how we can accommodate those needs. Taking all that information and rolling it into the next phase, which is our transit concepts phase. So all the information that we're collecting now is going to help inform the transit concepts that we look at in the next phase. So this will give us just an overview of some of the types of things that we're looking at in our existing conditions phase. So of course, land use is a key consideration here on South Fulton Parkway. As you all know, using the Parkway, there are large portions of the Parkway that are undeveloped today. So lots of open space, particularly on the western end of the corridor. But looking into the future, looking at some of the future land use plans that the jurisdictions along this corridor have adopted, we're seeing a lot of change. So a lot of transition from open space to multifamily residential to mixed use and other industrial and office spaces. So you can see that on this map here, some of the gold and blue sections that are popping up near the nodes that we have pointed out. And that's important for our transit concepts phase so that we know what types of development are coming, which areas we think will have additional ridership opportunities in the future. So we're also looking at roadway capacity compared to other 4-lane facilities in the region and in the MARTA service area. South Fulton Parkway does have pretty ample roadway capacity and relatively lower traffic volumes, but we also know that there's been an uptick in truck traffic in recent years, which is associated with the newer industrial and warehousing and distribution sites that have been locating. And there's probably more of that to come. So that's something we're keeping an eye on. Pedestrian and bicycle connections are critically important when we're talking about transit. We know that most of the transit riders using this corridor use either walking or cycling to get to either their end destination or to get to the bus from their home. So having a safe and connected infrastructure that serves them is very important, as well as crossing the streets near their bus stops. So part of our existing conditions work is cataloging what is out there today, where do we think some safety concerns are, and what types of infrastructure improvements are going to be necessary to accompany our transit scenarios. And of course, we're also looking at the existing transit service that's on the corridor today. So on South Fulton Parkway, we have Route 82 that traverses the Parkway from Campbellton Fairburn Road all the way up to College Park Station, where it ties into the heavy rail network. And it does that by connecting via Camp Creek Parkway. So you can see the map on the screen here. It's essentially a heat map, kind of shows the intensity of where more ridership exists today. And this is 2019 data. So we are looking at pre-pandemic ridership just to get a good feel of what ridership was before the pandemic. And you'll notice one sort of hot spot there on the corridor and on the western end. That's at Derrick Road, which is where a handful of industrial and logistics centers are located. One of the things that we did in our existing conditions work is we dug into some of MARTA's onboard transit surveys. So we got a little bit of a feel for the people who are using Route 82 today, where they're going and how they're using it. A vast majority of the people using this route are using it pretty regularly, about 5 days a week, and they're using it to get to work. And they're also using this as their primary mode of transportation to get to work. So if they didn't have Route 82, they wouldn't have a way to get to work. So that's pretty important. And that's our audience, and those are the customers that we're working for on this project. So another piece of our existing conditions is looking at where people live and where people are working. So we just talked about how important it is for us to look at where jobs are on the corridor. That's why a lot of people are using transit on South Fulton Parkway today. So this map gives us a good representation of where jobs are. So the bigger dots are locations that have more jobs, or number of jobs. And you'll see on this map, there's a greater concentration on the eastern section of our project area. But we know that a lot of the recent growth and a lot of the new growth that's coming down the pike is happening on that central and even on the further west part of the corridor. So these are things that we're taking into consideration. Also, as we've been talking with cities and other jurisdiction representatives and stakeholders, they've been giving us some information about what they think, what types of developments are coming in the future. So that's all playing a part in our information collecting as well. Okay, so as Morgan mentioned, on South Fulton Parkway, we are studying the feasibility of bus rapid transit. So we want to kind of help take a step back a little bit, or half a step back, and define that for you. So this chart gives us a picture of 3 different types of modes that MARTA has in the area. And I think it's the easiest way to define BRT, bus rapid transit, is by comparing it to local bus service. So for example, Route 82 that MARTA operates today. So by comparison, bus rapid transit typically has stops that are spaced further apart and a fewer number of stops than local bus service. It's serving longer distance trips. It typically has greater frequencies, so the buses come more often. And because of the fewer stops, it has faster travel time from end to end. And it also uses buses that have a higher capacity. So it's carrying more people kind of at a higher speed. So, and then also the stops are designed to feel more like stations rather than bus stops. So there's greater number of amenities there, larger spaces for sitting, larger sheltered spaces than a typical bus stop, and additional amenities that typical bus stops don't have. So perhaps bike parking, real-time signage, wayfinding signage and information, and even ticketing machines in some places. So with all those amenities, of course, comes a trade-off of cost and time to implement. So as we sort of move up this ladder from local bus to arterial rapid transit to bus rapid transit, the cost for each of those improvements increases, as does the time to implement those improvements. So here are a few illustrative examples of what BRT looks like in other parts of the country. And in the bottom left is a rendering from MARTA about showing what BRT could look like in Metro Atlanta. And we also, in the lower left corner image, also shows what that station could conceptually look like, along with a dedicated lane for the bus rapid transit. So you're seeing here, these probably look a lot different from the bus stops that you're used to seeing on Route 82, much larger covered space. So these stations are really more intended to be more comfortable, carry or be able to accommodate a larger number of folks waiting for the bus, and have additional amenities that you might find in a MARTA rail station. Okay, and with that, we're going to go back to Kathy and see if we can pull up the next poll question.
Thank you, Casey. Okay, so we're going to be giving you 2 back-to-back questions. And this is the first one. Which of these options do you favor most? 1, more local stops. 2, a moderate number of stops and a moderate travel times. Or 3, faster end-to-end service. And so recognizing that you can't have both. You can have more local stops and a faster end-to-end service time. So we want to hear from you. Give you just a few seconds.
And while you're doing that, I'll just note, I am seeing some questions come up in the question and answer box. So thank you for those. We do see them coming in. We're going to get to all of the questions at the very end. So keep those coming in as we go through the presentation and you think of questions.
Okay, so it looks like the winner here is faster end-to-end service at 50%. Followed by a moderate number of stops and a moderate number of travel times at 46%. And then we just have 4% at more local stops. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the next question. All right. So from a customer experience standpoint, what's most important to you at the South Fulton Parkway stops? And so we'd like you to select up to 3. Number 1, lighting. Number 2, crossing the street. Number 3, real-time information signage. Number 4, ticketing machine. Number 5, wayfinding information. Number 6, level boarding. Number 7, bicycle parking. We'll give you a few seconds to select up to 3.
And Kathy, the poll box just came up for me, so maybe
Yes.
we give them one more minute. Okay.
Okay, so it looks like the top 3 they're still coming in. Lighting at 80%, real-time information signage, and crossing the street. Those are our top 3. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for participating in that. This is really good information to have. And I think particularly the first question kind of helps reinforce that we're looking at BRT on South Fulton Parkway. That is the faster end-to-end service option. So that is reassuring to hear. And then of all of these amenities, I think this information also is going to help us make some good decisions for the next phase as we start looking at stop specific amenities. So thank you guys. Thank you, Kathy.
Sure.
Right. Okay, so now we're going to roll into the Roosevelt Highway key characteristics. So very similar set of information that we'll share with you in this section that you just saw on the South Fulton section. We're collecting a lot of the same information. So we want to know about current land use, how that's changing in the future. We want to know what's going on with travel patterns, what's going on with crash history, existing infrastructure, pedestrian and bike facilities, and all of the development that we know is coming in the future. So just to kind of recap maybe some of the differences that we saw between Roosevelt and South Fulton. Along Roosevelt Highway, there's a bit more development than in key places than we saw on the Parkway. For pedestrian and bike facilities, both corridors have a substantial need for good connectivity and good infrastructure along the whole corridor. On Roosevelt Highway, we are noting that there have been some spot improvements kind of over the years. So there's some good sidewalk infrastructure in place in key places, but there's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of gaps to be filled in for the whole corridor. In terms of safety, overall, compared to other roadways in the service area, relatively low crash rates, but we are noticing an upward trend in the crash history in recent years, and particularly at some key intersections. So that's something we're really taking a close look at and keeping an eye on. And then also similar to the Parkway, there's a lot of potential here to increase both the density and the mix of development in the future. And so I think for both the Parkway and Roosevelt Highway, we're at we have a really good opportunity here to sort of coordinate the future land use plans that all of these jurisdictions have put together and MARTA's future transit plans to really coordinate those and come up with a really positive future for South Fulton County. All right. So Route 180 is the local bus route that runs along Roosevelt Highway here. It extends from Palmetto down on the southern end of the corridor, again, up to College Park Station. So it has good connectivity into the rail system. And it does connect to several other key local routes along the way. And then here again, you're seeing another heat map showing where the majority of the boardings and people are getting on and off the bus. And this is a little more recent data. So you're seeing some kind of key clusters near places like downtown Fairburn, the park and ride lot, some pretty decent ridership on the southern end in Palmetto. And of course, it really intensifies when we get up to College Park. So on Roosevelt Highway, Morgan mentioned early on, she kind of described that what we're looking at on each of these two corridors, and how on South Fulton Parkway, we're evaluating BRT as a long-term solution for the corridor. On Roosevelt Highway, we're looking at something much more near term. So when she showed you that schedule of the two projects, we're looking at Roosevelt going to construction in the next few years. And so these transit enhancements, it's really important for us to kind of take a slightly different focus than what we're looking at on the Parkway. So on Roosevelt Highway, we're taking a really targeted look at each of our stop areas, and we're looking at the physical constraints and the physical condition of the infrastructure there. So this is a list of things that of pieces of information that we're collecting, really with a targeted focus of determining where does it make most sense to have these enhanced bus stops, and where can we feasibly construct those enhanced bus stops? So where is there physically space available to do so? So we're looking at the current infrastructure, both the roadway infrastructure as well as utility infrastructure. There is of course, a freight railroad that runs parallel to Roosevelt Highway for a good extent of the project area, and that's pretty important because that's a pretty significant physical constraint. We're looking at lighting or the lack thereof at sort of key places where people are waiting for the bus and walking to the bus, as well as crossing opportunities. We know a lot of people are crossing Roosevelt Highway and then have to cross the railroad track. So where are there good crossing opportunities currently, and where are there good crossing opportunities in the future? And then, of course, we're also looking at existing development and existing land use and what we think is going to be the land use in the future, so that we can help plan appropriately and have good, bus stop improvements where we know there's going to be significant demand there. So these are our, sorry, let me move that forward. You guys didn't see this slide when I was talking about it. My apologies. All right, we're advancing them now. Okay. So these are the stop locations that we're looking at on Roosevelt Highway. We're looking at both the improved stops and the super stops. So those are some two different levels of bus stop enhancements. The improved stops have improved shelters, seating area, potentially bike parking, and good vertical bus markers for the operators to see. The super stops, by comparison, have a larger footprint and additional amenities. So these are where we might see ticket vending machines, real-time arrival signage, level boarding, solid ADA accessible ramps, and other amenities that make it more accessible for people with disabilities. And so on the map that you see on the right side of your screen, you'll see where we have started considering where these improved stops and super stops might be located. This is still under consideration. So like I said, we're just wrapping up our existing conditions phase, and this is the phase that we're starting now. So this is what we'll be working on over the next several months. And the next time we come back to you all with a project update, we'll have more of this information available for you to review and to weigh in on. Right, so going back to those two types of stops, the improved stops and super stops, these are what they could conceptually look like. So, you can see just by comparison, the super stop is really where we want to be really cognizant and place those at locations where we know there's going to be a more significant ridership demand both today and in the future. So that's why we're looking so closely at future land use plans and future travel patterns. All right, and next I think we'll roll into another polling question with Kathy.
All right, thank you, Casey. Trish is going to launch the last poll, but before we do, I just want to recognize 3 other of our team members. We have Greg Rufrida and Charles Rosa, and they are with MARTA. And then we have Trish Kalpetzer, and she's with the collaborative firm. Trish, you want to go ahead and launch the final poll, please? Okay, from a customer experience perspective, what's most important to you at Roosevelt Highway stops? And we'd like you to select up to 3.
Yeah, so these are the same options that we presented to you on South Fulton Parkway. So are the same things or do you have the same priorities here? Are there other things that you think are more important for transit users on Roosevelt Highway? Or do you think or are your answers the same? So just kind of think through that.
Yeah, so again, you see number 1, lighting, 2, crossing the street, 3, real-time information signage, 4, ticketing machine, 5, wayfinding information, and 6, level boarding. Okay, so it looks like we have the same. The top 3 are lighting, crossing the street, and real-time information signage.
Great, thank you, Kathy.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so Morgan shared with you early on our overall outreach strategy and kind of gave you a rundown of who we're talking to and at what points in our process. So up to this point, we've had a number of conversations with the mayors of the jurisdictions here, the city councils, city staff from Public Works and Community Development. We've spoken with our regional agency partners, GDOT. Both of the routes that we're looking at are state routes, so those are GDOT owned right away. So our partnership and collaboration with GDOT is going to be critically important throughout this process. Fulton County has been a partner, as well as the 2 community improvement districts that are located in our project area. And now, of course, today we're talking to you all, the public. So this is a quick overview of some of the key things and takeaways that we've heard from all of those individuals so far. We've talked a lot, especially with our mayors, about the relationship between BRT on South Fulton Parkway and the timing of upcoming development. So when we talked about land use, we're really at like a key sort of opportunistic time to take advantage of future development and take advantage of the amount of undeveloped right of way that exists on the corridor. We've heard from almost everyone has an idea about complete streets, covered shelters, and safe pedestrian crossings and safe pedestrian access to the bus stops, and crossing the railroads. So those are all really key things that we're taking a look at, and our fact finding is being reinforced by things that we're hearing from the people we're talking to. We also heard a number of our stakeholders have given us really helpful information about other roadway projects that are being planned and other proposed developments that they know about that we might not be able to find out about. So we're kind of taking all that information into account as well. And then last but not least, access to jobs. We talked earlier about how a lot of the ridership using these local bus routes today are using them 5 days a week and are using them to get to their jobs as their primary form of transportation. So access to jobs is really critical for riders today, but also for what we're planning for in the future. And there's a really key tie-in between what we're doing and what we're looking at and future economic development opportunities. So those are all things that we're going to keep as a part of this conversation going forward.
All right, thank you so much, Casey. You've given us a wealth of information. So I'm going to talk to a little bit about the next steps in this process. Like I mentioned earlier in the schedule portion of the presentation, we are under the assessment phase, which will end in fiscal year 2023, which is June 30, 2023. A part of the assessment phase does consist these different elements, and we are finalizing and completing the existing conditions analysis. When we come back to you all and in engagement phase later on throughout the life of this project, an engagement point number 2 will bring some transit concepts, some ideas of what the stations, what the alignment for the BRT, what the stops could look like. And then, of course, with engagement point number 3, we'll bring a finalized implementation plan of how do we move forward and a completion of, kind of draft of all the feedback that was received in the previous 2 engagement points. Next slide. So before we go into the question and answer section, I wanted to just provide some information about, how do you participate and how do you stay engaged? So these are just a few of those ways to do that as we're going through this project. Staying in touch with the project website. We do have a web page specifically for this project that is on the MARTA website. And that link is there. And we can also drop that link in the chat just in case you all are interested in it. It does provide feedback on, where we are in the project, the different phases, and a little bit of information about each as we continue to go through the project. You can email us questions directly at publichearinginfo@itsmarta.com. Continue to join us in these future community and virtual meetings, and we'll, as we continue to utilize these hybrid approaches, we'll have some opportunities for in-person and some opportunities for virtual. We will do our very best to list out those meeting opportunities on the website, as well as utilizing social media to publicize those opportunities as well. And definitely last but not least, share the news with your friends and your neighbors. Spread it as much as possible. We've been talking to a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different local and state government partners, and we appreciate everyone's ability to spread to their different organizations in order to get the word out about this meeting. And we want to continue to keep that momentum going. So we ask that you do the same as well. Next slide. All right, so questions and answers section, everyone's favorite part of the presentation. So we do have a couple questions, and so we're gonna get started on a few of them. And I would just, we have someone that's monitoring the chats and collecting a lot of these questions. So we're gonna get started, and as they're coming in, we'll do our very best to respond to as many as possible. All right. Let's see. Okay. First question. I'm sorry, 1 second. Let me get this lined up really well. Okay. First question. When will the project be completed? So the transit initiative will complete its assessment phase for both quarters at the end of fiscal year 2023, which is June 30, 2023. And it will also complete the concept and design phase during fiscal year 2024, which is June 30, 2024. We operate in fiscal years. For Roosevelt Highway, we will begin construction on those identified stops by fiscal year 2025, which starts July 2024. And for South Fulton Parkway, we will finalize the action plan that will outline our next steps with the BRT system by fiscal year 2025. Right. Another question. Let's see. What role does the public play in the general outcome of this project? That's a good question. Okay. So the public plays an important role in the direction of this project. During the 3 engagement points and phases that we discussed earlier in the presentation, the public's going to have an opportunity to give commentary on where we should focus the transit investments and what should be included. So we've seen a couple of other questions as we were going through this presentation, saw some questions in the chat as related to, the amenities, what's included, is it ADA compliant? Do we have charging stations, those sort of things. That's the type of feedback that we're looking for as we're going through this project. We are currently, like I mentioned earlier, in the first engagement point, and we'll have 2 more, one in the latter part of this year and another during the early part of the next year. Okay. All right, next question. Oh, this is a good one. What is the 15th Amendment and why is it important to this project? It is very important. So the 15th Amendment is the contractual agreement that MARTA has with our Metro Atlanta counties. In this agreement, MARTA was initially directed to examine South Fulton Parkway for high capacity transit opportunities. Roosevelt Highway was added later to the project to identify transit enhancements that could be developed quickly and provide support for our existing service, which is MARTA Route 180. Another question. Will this information be available online? Yes, this presentation information will be available at the project's webpage on MARTA's website, and we can drop that in the right there. Thank you, right there. We can we'll drop it in the link in the chat as well, just so if you want to copy and paste it for yourselves. And we can play, and we'll also provide the information. If anyone decides that they want the presentation themselves, feel free to email us and we'll be more than happy to pass that information along to you. Thanks. All right. Are the stops and stations shown on the map the confirmed locations from where we could expect improvements? Okay. So the sites identified on the map are proposed for consideration, and we've seen a couple of different locations being dropped in the questions and answers. So, and that's the importance of us having these engagement points or engagement opportunities so that we can really hear from the public where maybe they're wanting us to direct our attention to. The identified sites that we have currently mapped out or initially proposed due to current or anticipated ridership demand. We could have we potentially saw supportive land use patterns that were surrounding that location, or we saw that there were some increasing safety concerns. As we continue to progress during this engagement point and future ones, we will use this information that we're receiving from the public in order to determine the final locations. All right. All right, next question. What is the difference between an improved stop and a super stop? Okay, so, and Casey, if you want to pull up that that visual while I answer this question, that'll be great. So an improved stop includes simple passenger amenities such as a shelter, your seating, your signage, as well as your concrete pad. With all of our stops, it is a goal for them to be ADA compliant. So I saw another question, a smaller question that came through, just to respond to that. Super stop includes everything that an improved stop has, but it will have a larger footprint. It has level boarding, a larger canopy shelter, as you can see in the picture. And there's a lot more technology opportunities, such as your ticket vending machines and real-time arrival information. During some of our recent engagement with our local government partners, staff was asked to look into charging stations as opportunities, within these opportunities that we're looking at now. So it's going to be our team's, one of our team's efforts to look at and see how we can accommodate that as well. All right. Okay. So, this is a good question. And Charles, I may ask you to help with this one. It's a bus shelter question. So can we have more shelters at the bus stops along Roosevelt? What is the process for that? And I'm gonna tee it off, and then Charles, please feel free to jump in. But one thing about this particular project, it will aid us in being able to address a lot of the shelter and capacity needs that are currently along the corridor. But Charles, if you could kind of speak to the process of, how we select shelters, that would be great.
Thank you, Morgan. So basically, we do look at ridership for our locations for shelters for upgrade amenities at our bus stops. But we do also look at the land use. So if it's near like a senior facility or medical facility, we would definitely consider those locations for upgrades at the bus stop level, such as shelters or benches. We have added a few of them this year and past year, so we are still looking at other areas along, including Roosevelt Highway and South Fulton Parkway. So any specific locations, we are definitely would be receptive to looking at them as evaluating them also. So if there's a specific location, specific intersection that you want us to upgrade the bus stop, we'll be more than we will welcome those comments.
Thanks so much, Charles. That's great. Thank you. All right. Next question. What is the difference between the current service and BRT service? Casey, I'm actually going to ask you if you can kind of speak to that one just really quickly about the difference, and maybe can pull up that slide.
Sure. Yeah, let me go back to our transit mode definitions.
Yeah.
So the current service on both of these corridors is local bus service. So you see that on the left side of this matrix here. And local bus service is typically what you see on most MARTA routes. It's lower level of frequency. Your buses are accommodating 50 to 100 riders per hour. And that's simpler to implement, lower cost, and lower amount of time to complete. Bus rapid transit is really a higher level, it's a higher capacity transit option. It's somewhere between your local bus service and a rail service. So it is generally, we call it bus that operates and feels more like rail. So it's going to have a higher level of frequency. Buses come more often, longer span of service, larger capacity vehicles. And the stops are really designed more like stations, like we were talking about earlier, and they're usually spaced further apart. So as a part of this planning effort, we really are taking a close look at where do these stations, where are they most warranted based on transit demand, future development, and our current riders. And of course, along with all of those added benefits comes a higher cost than your local bus service and a higher, longer time to implement.
Thanks so much, Stacey. That's great. Thank you. Alrighty. Okay. Next question. Will improvements at the bus stops include sidewalks? So during the current phase of this project, staff has assessed the pedestrian facilities near proposed stops and stations and have identified many sidewalk gaps and just a lot of broken connectivity. And this is going to require us to be working very closely with our local government partners in order to collectively address as much as possible the safety and connectivity issues that we're seeing at these proposed locations. And that will include not only just efforts with this particular project, but also efforts that are being done locally for sidewalk improvements. All right, next question. Let's see, is my 10th question, looks like. How are we working with local businesses to gain input from the public? Okay, really good question. During this initial engagement, we have met and presented to interested local stakeholder organizations, as well as distributed public meeting information to many of our warehouse distribution locations. A large part of this engagement effort is to identify new stakeholders to educate and include throughout this process. Staff is continuously looking and asking for any and all interested organizations to participate. As a matter of fact, if you are one of those businesses that would like to be included in this effort and continuously receiving, information and feedback, feel free to, drop your business name in the chat, and we'll be, happy to make sure that we're keeping you up to date and including you. All right, another question. Have we considered the future growth of the area, and will these improvements take that into consideration? Yes, absolutely. During the existing conditions analysis, the phase that we're in now, we look at both the current and the future growth patterns of the area. We received this information from the ARC and will develop transit improvement concepts that addresses the current and the future capacity needs of the area. Okay. Let's see. Let's see here. Let's see. Do I have any more? Oh, go ahead.
I was wondering, yeah, Morgan, there's a question about bus stop maintenance and how MARTA handles that and how they coordinate with jurisdictions. I was wondering maybe if that was a good question for Charles to chime in.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, Charles, could you help us with that?
Yes, so any bus stop that has an amenity, such as a bench or shelter, our contractor does service those stops and maintain those stops. Now, if it's just a regular MARTA sign, then the local jurisdiction is responsible for any of the trash litter area. But as far as any damage stops, it's going to be MARTA.
And Charles, if you could, if you can maybe just let people know how they can contact MARTA if they ever, see like signs down, or that would be great.
Yes, they can report those directly to the customer service at the one that you guys posted earlier at serve, I think it is, at itsmarta.com, or they can call the 404-848-5000 number. And then those will be directly sent to our staff.
I'll say related to maintenance and upkeep, one of the things that we heard from our elected official conversations was the request to look into garbage receptacles, and not just trash cans, but possibly in some locations, trash cans that have a greater capacity, because they do fill up quickly. And then when they're full, they tend to spill garbage on the ground. So that's another piece of insight that we heard throughout this process.
So we have a few more minutes, so I'm going to try to capture one or two more questions that we're seeing here, because they're pretty unique. One question that came up: will you work with local artists to put murals on the super stops? So that's something that we can, definitely look into. And so we can definitely, keep that in mind as something that could be of interest to only heighten the customer experience at the stop. So thank you for that question. We'll definitely keep that in mind. And let's see. Let's see. The quarter. Sorry, we're just trying to wade through some of the duplicative questions. We do have a couple
I saw
of them.
an interesting one, Morgan, that was kind of unique, and they asked about bus technology and what MARTA is looking at for future like types of fuel for buses. So, I mean, would you like to talk about that for a minute? Like,
well, yeah,
clean,
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, I mean, we just recently just recently attained within our fleet electric buses, and so we're like our system, like in many other systems, we're in this process of trying to reduce our carbon footprint as much as possible, reduce emissions as much as possible. And so adding alternative fuel vehicles like electric buses definitely helps to do that. So, it'll definitely be a goal of us to be as, close to alternative fueled, have a close to, 100% or so, like, alternative fuel fleet, but, it does take time. So that's kind of the goal, but we're definitely always looking into that. Really good question. Okay, so maybe one more question. And for the rest of the questions, like we mentioned earlier, we'll definitely make sure to respond back to you. Let's see. Let's see. What is an actual BRT system and what does that look like? So this question kind of came up and I might have gotten this mixed up a little bit earlier, but let's just kind of, if Casey, if you could just kind of go back and show a couple pictures of what the BRT system looks like, just to kind of remind people, just to understand that difference. Because we do realize it's a newer type of system. And I think there was another kind of mini question that, asked, do we have BRT systems currently in the system, right? Well, BRT currently in the system. We have a lot of BRT projects all throughout the system that are currently underway. So we'll be launching a lot of those relatively soon. Right.
Morgan, I could say a little bit more about that.
Okay, thank you.
I put a typed response in the Q&A box regarding this, but we do not currently have what is considered a full BRT line in the system now. The first one is going to be Summerhill BRT. We just completed full design of that project just in the last couple of weeks. That is going to be going out for bids for construction later this year. We did have another question in the comments about opportunities for project management and construction management. I think for the purposes of this project, we're still way before any of that, but we do have a lot of existing opportunities for procurement. And I posted a link in the Q&A that shows some of those current opportunities. But Summerhill BRT is the first one, and it is expected to go into service in 2025.
Thank you so much, Greg. That's great. All right. Okay. All right, Casey, if you could go to our very last slide. And just as a thank you. So, just as a reminder, definitely feel free to follow our project at our project website. You can contact us at the emails that we listed earlier. And of course, my email is there. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or comments. We will be addressing the additional questions that we received that we weren't able to address today, but we do appreciate everyone's feedback, everyone's comments, and we expect this conversation to continue even further. So I would like to just take this moment to thank my team, my project team here, amongst all my MARTA staff, the excuse me, the collaborative firm. I'm tongue-tied right now. BHB as well as WSP. Thank you all very, very much for all the work that we've been doing collectively together. And I'm hoping to be able to bring some really good opportunities to the Southern Fulton Southern Fulton County portion and ridership. So thank you guys so much. And that's all we have for y'all. Thank you.